And it changed?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right, so we're going to speak about it in the next hour, about sperm donor. It's obviously a very, very complex issue, and lots of practical and halachic questions that arise. So who needs a sperm donor? Because we Moshe, we all know that Shuvas are a Moshe, and of course at the time, a sperm donor was a much more common used procedure and maybe much more needed procedure. And we'll see who needs a sperm donor today. So first of all, someone has azoospermia, someone who doesn't have any sperm at all, or doesn't produce sperm at all, no sperm in the ejaculate at all, and has done, we've spoken already about testicular exploration, unsuccessful, he doesn't produce sperm. Why would that be the case? Why would that be the case? Possibly because they have Y deletions. As we spoke about last week, that you have a deletion of the Y chromosome, that a person who has a deletion of the Y chromosome, especially in certain areas of the Y chromosome, they would produce no sperm. So azoospermia is the problem or is the symptom, and the cause is the Y microdeletions. Or Klinefelter syndrome. Klinefelter syndrome, we mentioned it also a little bit last week, is XXY, someone who is a male who has an extra X chromosome, which is more is not always better. And in this case, it actually will often create a situation which a person doesn't produce sperm at all. So again, azoospermia is the symptom, and the cause is Klinefelter. Or somebody didn't have it, has no genetic abnormality, but was born normal and unfortunately had a chemotherapy or radiation or other medical treatments that caused the person to have no sperm. They had no sperm created. Of course, someone who had cancer and had the testicles removed would also, of course, need to have a sperm donor. Someone who had undescended testicles, we spoke about that already. Undescended testicles, if it's left untreated, can be extremely severe. I think I told you, we had a young man here a couple of weeks ago he came from Eastern Europe, who had undescended testicles, and it had been treated in the age of about 11 or 12. And so far, we haven't been able to find sperm from him. Someone has a very serious varicocele that has caused a testicular atrophy. We have a sperm with a genetic abnormality. So the person sperm exists. It's not there's the lack of sperm, but the sperm carries a genetic abnormality. So we can have something, for example, as Q2323, which is a situation on the 22nd, 23rd chromosome, there is an extra part, and therefore the child would always have a genetic problem. Or 2222 would always have Down syndrome. And so we don't have that. There's absolutely no way that we can have a child doesn't have that. Or the case in which you have no husband, there's no sperm, there's no husband. We'll speak about also in the presentation. And a problematic husband, a husband who has sperm, but he doesn't want to use the sperm because he has a psychological problem, or he has in his family people who have psychological problems. So we don't want to use the sperm. So we have those. We call them as a spermia besechet. That he has he's not as a spermic, but in his mind he's as a spermic. I don't have sperm because I just don't want to use my sperm. So we've had all of these permutations we've had, and all these people would need to have a sperm donor. You should know that the sperm banks today that used to be the real source of look at Rav Moshe's Tshuva written in the 60s, 70s. So the use of a sperm donor, the people that use the sperm banks today the most are single women, lesbian women, single women. Women. That's really the most use of them. And most of these other problems we're able to solve. And if you have total as a sperm, we can't do anything about it. But if you have low sperm count, then we can produce a sperm sample from through doing a testicular biopsies. We've spoken about already. Sorry. So who says that? What are the material? What are ostrim? So the ostrim. Why do they say it's asa? What's the makor of it? The isor. It's good arayos, right? It's basically we're creating a child with good arayos with another child with another father. That's a problem. And what is the makor for that? Well, maybe the pasuk there's an isur to give your zera to somebody else. That would be the isur of using zera, and that's written by many of the poskim that are oiser, the Bnei Uva, the Marachelev, the Rav Yol Todlerman, probably the most famous posek that came out strongly against Rav Moshe and hounded Rav Moshe for his tshuva. Chagas Yaakov, here a picture of Rav Reish, the Eliezer, they came out against sperm donor, saying that this is Gilarize, that there's a tama, it's tuma of creating a one child from another child. But the vak bishto, below bisha acher. But Moshe, the others, what's the issue? Let's think. Let's think that what really is. The saying in Eretz Yisrael is that in Bnei Brak something is asur until it's proven mutter, and in Yerushalayim it's mutter until proven asur. So before we come and say asur, let's think why should it be asur? So that's where Moshe's tshuva, very other tshuva. So the Matirim said there's no gilui errors, the lo bilad, that the issur of arayot is when you have forbidden sexual relations. But to get forbidden pregnancy, that's not a problem. Like we saw already, that the Rabbeinu Peretz, we already saw this when we spoke about supervision. They said a woman who sits on the sadin, the problem is avchana. The Rabbeinu tells us it's mutter. The problem is avchana. We don't know who the father is. That was use that as a makor for needing supervision. But the child isn't a mamzer. There's no mamzerus in this case, because in the end of the day there was no biat isur. In the same case of the woman who's a tababambati, we didn't say there was an isur said. The only problem was that the question is it masanisim? Is it something usual? So who the matirim and Mekalacha, Rav Ben Zion Uziel, Uziel, sorry, the chief rabbi together with Rav Kook, the Srida Eish, the Rabbi Omer of Ravadia, Shlomo Zalman, and Igos Moshe. It's very interesting that this psak was, even though it's really, if you think who's the matir Trumat Zera, it's Rav Moshe. There was many other people who matir Trumat Zera, and the reason that Rav Moshe is probably so associated with the psak is because Rav Moshe was hounded for that psak. Unlike Rosh Zalman, Rosh Zalman was hounded for other psakim, but for this psak he got away with it. No one really spoke about it. Ravadia, nobody really did deal. So Rosh Zalman said that's the proof of the Gemara says that that there's a mazal for certain psakim. Some people have a psak, they have a mazal dik psak, and some have a less than mazal dik psak. So Moshe was hounded. There's a whole shita why Moshe was hounded. Not for that's a historical discussion, and not for our halachic discussion. There's actually a nice lecture by Penny Dunner that explains the whole machlokas against Rav Moshe, why they were against. It's very interesting tshuva, but it's a nice, interesting lecture, but not for now. The Rav Yoel Teitelbaum came out strongly against Rav Moshe. What he said, all that we said is that there's no biat isur is when there's biat iyata. If it was no bidiyata, that she had no intention of getting pregnant, then we would say it's not isur. Have a biyata, then it's vaday mamzerus. Then he says that if a person does it on purpose, then that's called mamzerus. She went out and she wanted to have a child. In the same way that we say, we think any other isur, there's no isur. We're by Rav Nevensel on Sunday. We're speaking about the Otzazer Levatala. But there's no isur of Otzazer Levatala if it's b'mitasek. A person has no intention of ejaculating. So that's not the Otzazer Levatala. The person does it lechavana, then it becomes biatis. Then it becomes Otzazer Levatala. So the same thing we say here, that since there's no that Rav Yoel Teitelbaum wanted to say that the isser is when she knows, when she does on purpose to have a child. The woman goes into babambati innocently and gets pregnant. Then or she lies on the sheets of someone else. Then that's it. That's not the isser. That the isser would be if she would lie on b'chavana on the sheets of the zar in order to get pregnant. That would be mamzerus. That would be mamash. We said before that would be letamaba, and therefore, in this case, in which she does it on purpose, she goes to get sperm from the bank and to get pregnant with someone else, and that would be the issue. So we spoke already when we spoke about supervision that the pasuk says Elo modim uposhimbi, bortim ikem modim uposhimbi, and that the Gemara says is the bnei tesha midot, which one is bnei ebuvia. We already mentioned that Rashi says bnei ebuvia. What's the din? That the Gemara, the Torah says, "Yod lacha Elohim lezaracha acharecha." Says the Gemara, "Lemaled shetzarich lavchin ben zaro sherishon lezaro shenishnu." We already saw that. Therefore, there's an issue, and Rashi says, "En hashchina shora levadai." When we know who the father is, when we know who the mother is, when we know this is this couple, then we have then a Kodesh Baruch Hu is there. Shezaro miyuchas acharav. V'achinam mekayim elam b'nedarim. What's the problem with the buvia? A person has relations with one person or thinks another person doesn't know who the wife is or who the person is having relations with. Why is that so problematic? So the answer says Rashi is because it's b'nei buvia. We have no idea. We have no sense of who is the father and the mother, who's the yichus, who we have, that's a problem. And therefore, l'chora, that would be a makor of isur, of having zera from someone else, of which we think this is the person's child, the Mr. and Mrs. Cohen turn up with a child, and suddenly it's not their child. So that's the problem. The other poskim that we saw before, who also yes, Rabbi Halpin.
Yeah, I'm just curiosity-wise. Let's say we didn't have these psukim, just by definition. If we have an isser of arayot, by definition, doesn't that mean that we need to know?
I think we could say again, if we go to like Rav Moshe's psak, we can say that isser arayot is to have forbidden sexual relations, not to create children who are b'nei buvim. That's not the nechori arayos. Arayos is that I'm not allowed to have relations with someone, whether or not that ends up with a child. There's isser having a arayos. A child born from that is a totzav of arayos. We have a mamzer is born from Eshedish. However, we don't. If there was no isur arayos, there was no masabir, then the fact we have a child that's it's an upsetting thing, but it's not not a problem. We do have, you're right, is we have a concept. It's not really a pasuk, but it's really a pshat of a shtuki, of someone we don't know who their father is. And the reason that we have that is that's mala shabasu biyuchsen. Gemara says mala biyuchsen, that we should need to know who it is. But that seems to be built on that idea. We have it in the yuchus. That's the pshat. What are the other? Yeah.
We would follow road, meaning that even though it's possible you could end up marrying your ishasach or whatever it is, somebody relative. So what are the other poskim that came out? So what was the makor that they said? So the exactly what Halpin said. We don't even pasuk. It's pasuk that's not what Kadosh Baruch Hu wanted. The Kadosh Baruch Hu didn't want us to have children in a way that we take zera from one person to another person. The Tzitz Eliezer said it's chilul kedushat hamishpacha. We have a kedusha, the family. This is how we have ish v'isha and a child, and to suddenly bring in somebody else, that's chilul kodesh shel hamishpacha. And the Tzitz Eliezer also writes, etzem betzua hafraya melachutit begufa shel isha. So just to do regular IVF. Afilu pnuya toiva gadolahi. Ba'obei yisurim chamurim b'divrei sofrim b'divrei Torah kuchem b'zeh. What are the yisurim? Kagon shemisachad achato me'aviv. Exactly what happened to said, that we could have that a child would marry, a person would marry someone who's really, he thinks that it's just another woman. In fact, it's his sister. We could even say that in fact that even more than that why does he have an attraction to that woman? Because she's like him. Why should she's very like him? Because he's his sister. So that would be a issue. If the woman died leaving children from IVF, then the child will be chayav b'chalitza. The chora. That we saw that already. Chalkes Yaakov says that if a child was born without children, she needs chalitza. She seems to have these children, but they're not her children. They were born from IVF or from sperm donor, from egg donor. Kagon v'shema yibay me'eshed achiv. Maybe the exact opposite. There'll be yibum v'zed achiv. V'kein chashash lisug gezela b'mikra she'yavo li'orash David. There'll be a question of gezela. He's going to be. He say, "I'm the yoresh." In fact, it's not his child bichlal. והכל מוזרים על כך שלא לתת יד לגרום ליצירת יצורים עלובים כאלה בעולם. And everybody has a chova to prevent the birth of these nebuch children in the world. ויש בזה הן משום תקנת הוולד ומשום תקנת הלבב. It's also takanat avlad. The child should be the good of the child, and it should also be good of the ervad. Shouldn't be that we have more and more arayos. That's what Rav wrote in Tzitz Eliezer in Chelek Tet Siman Nud Aleph, the very famous tshuva that we've seen before, and we quoted in other cases. So that's Rav Valdemar comes strongly against Bichlal. He says that it just creates too many problems in the world. Asur. So that's all of the problem is, if we think about it, if we have a child that's born from Jewish sperm. So let's see, what are the isurim, what are the possible problems if we have born from Zera Yehudi? So the first thing is, as we just said, that we have co-joint marriages. We have marriages between two brothers. Why would that happen? Because if the person takes Zera from a man, and that man has also a child, those two get married, of course, they're achvachot, because he's clearly the father. It would also be the case if he donates to two different people. He donates to one woman, to Rivka, and he donates to Rachel, and Rachel and Rivka's children marry each other, and they actually come from the same donor. Of course, there are many apocryphal stories of the women
who came to the birthday party, and they're talking and chatting, and they found out that all three women come from the same took zera from the same donor. So the horror could happen. There's also a question of safek mamzeris. We said as if we hold, like we just said, that mamzeris is not b'maseh mamzeris is the havaya, the vlad is the having a child who is born from an eshet ish and not from the father. So then l'chora we have a safek mamzer. Just said if we just had a remez, why don't we say rov bilot achrebal? Rov bilot achrebal. We could say here we know that he's not, that he's like he was not found at all. He wasn't ben himself. If he wasn't ben himself, then we don't say so. Of course, we know that there's a whole deal in the Rishonim Achronim that if he was away for a long time and he comes back, or maybe we can say that there was actually a very long pregnancy, or maybe he came to visit her b'shedim. He came through some miraculous kvitza. He came and then he went back. But generally, that's just to get around the Isra. But the Isra l'chadchila is makayam. The question would be a shtuki. Shtuki means we have no idea who the father is. Comes to say we don't know who he is. Therefore, he's a sulav abikat. We have no idea who he is. Maybe he's a mamzer. It's a fake mamzer. He is a mamzer. If the zera was a mamzer, doesn't matter whether we have mamzeros or not mamzeros. The zera was a mamzer, and we know that the father, as the person gives the zera, then the child will also be a mamzer. And it would also be a zola. That's the reason why we have shtuki. We have shtuki because we don't know whether the father was a mamzer or not. The woman comes and says, "I'm pregnant from who?" She doesn't know who. And then we have a question. The whole sugya and Masachet Ketubas and Chet, that the whole the Zayin, that the whole question about that the woman comes from says, "I'm pregnant," and we don't know who the father is. So then we have a question of whether she comes from the rova, the people that come from the city, or kasher, and rova, the people that came from the shira or kasher. Then we went matir trey ruben. But if without that, lechor is a safek mamzeros. Maybe the child is a mamzer. It's also a question of what we just said. There'll be a question about marrying without a chalitza, because Bershus is chayab a chalitza. There'll be a question of Yeresh, but close to we just said. There's a Rav Waldenberg. If the child is a Kohen, if the father is a Kohen and the child will not be a Kohen, then they'll think that the child is a Kohen, and they'll give him to eat truma, or they give him to make a bracha. It'll be a question of bracha levatah. There'll be a question of yichud. The child is born as a daughter, and she's born to now that there's Mr. and Mrs. Cohen, and they take a zera from another year, Mr. Levi, and the child is now born as a daughter. So the father, Mr. Cohen, can't have yichud with his daughter. So it's a question whether it's actually true. We know, of course, the tshuvas. Rav Moshe has a tshuva like that, and the Sitziliezer has a tshuva like that. If you adopt a child when it's very, very small, can we say that there's a question, there's the issue of yichud? So l'chora, we generally make it with that. But l'chora, there's a l'chora sheila. Question of muber chavero, maneket chavero. If a woman she was pregnant with someone else's child, do we have a question of she has to wait for 9 months plus 24 months of that shouldn't be maneket chavero? It's also a question. So that was the reason why almost all the poskim that were matir were only matir in a case of zeragoy. Do we, with zeragoy, mevatel all of these possible isurim that we just saw in zerayud? Rosh Shlomo Zalman writes the following: Atar nevaer din azarat melachutit minochri. Let's talk about having insemination from a goy. Letoch gufa shel Yisraelit. ואף שאך למותר הוא להרבות דברים על קיאו וזומה שבדבר זה, even though we can say it's an unpleasant and a disgusting and a rejectful idea that we should do such a thing, בכל אופן, let's forget whether we say it's disgusting, is it מותר אסור? אפשר שנכון להרחיק מן הכיאור ולא לדון כלל בדבר שיכול חס וחלילה לגרום להכניס זרע מרעים בכרם ישראל, בכרם השם בית ישראל. There's also a question, do we want to have zera goy running around within Am Yisrael? That's sapachat. Hayot ubishvil rov hanashim abot לשאול על כך ונכונות לפעולה זו, איזה ממש שאלת חיים. Says Rav Shlomo Zalman, it's disgusting and we shouldn't do it and we don't want women, but women come, it's for them it's pikuach nefesh. Shelat chayim. A woman wants to do it. She's living with her husband for 10, 20 years and he doesn't have any zera. So she wants to have zera torim. Kivan she'i efshar lasot azra miYisrael. But he can't do the Zera Yisrael because of all the presents that we just mentioned before in the previous slide. Lachen choshevani, because man shochmei ador lo gazru isur barur, al kach shuma aleinu levarem mitzad halacha mutar asur. So Shlomo Zalman, therefore, let's think whether it's mutar asur, because we didn't say there's an isur. What's the says of Moshe? מכיוון שהטעם מפורש שם, שהוא מדין גזירה שמא יישא אחת אוכתו. The whole problem that we have of Zera Yudi is that they shouldn't marry brother and sister. I.e., there's a question of Yichsin, and it's a Malash Asuba Yichsin that we shouldn't have the possibility of maybe someone marrying someone who he's related to and he's a Betzi Sur Letatrin. Says Rav Moshe, if that's the case, that's the only Isur. Yesh Latir Bezera Shel Nochri. Shekevan Shavlad Yeh Yisrael, Kevan She'imo Yisraelit, Ein Lachush Leklum, the Ein Lo Yachas La'ava Nochri. Says Rav Moshe, if we take a goy, then we solve basically the problem. Let's go back to the previous slide that we saw before. Let's think of all the problems if we have a goy. Well, there's no yuchsin, so there's no question of achshem isad achato. Even if the same goy gives the two women, doesn't matter. There's no yuchsin to the goy. It's shum davar. There's no mamzerus because no mamzerus by a goy. If we know it's a goy, if we know that the boy was a goy, then the woman never becomes a zona. But the child is not a mamzer. The child will be kasher. Shtuki, whenever shtuki, is mutalavo bekal. That would still be the question of chalitza. However, lechora, we can say tell her to do chalitza when the child if she dies, if the husband dies before she does. Yoresh shelo kedin. So yoresh shelo kedin. So I can also get around that. Maybe he gives it a matana. So they get around it. Kohen, we didn't solve the problem. We'll come to that in a moment. Yichud, there still would be a problem. However, the major problems of mamzerus lahor we've solved. Says Moshe, we actually have zera good, and so the Rav Moshe writes that tshuva, and then he writes in other tshuvas as well of the people that ma'arer on whether actually he was posek like that. It was a big tumult in the world. There Moshe gave this heter. Heter was given in the 60s or 70s. There was a big furor. So how can you give it? Rav Moshe writes why we thought it was mutar. Again, we just said if not us, it's mutar. So continues the Rav Moshe. Sorry, says Shlomo Zalman. Im zerahu minochri af shemechu ar misad laas maod lasod ve'ein safek ki teva av tzafun beben. The child will become like the father, and therefore will have goyishka blood, Jewish genes inside him, which will have ramifications for his spiritual nature. V'gam ve'azra shelo b'kedusha ulam mi'ikar adin efshar lo asur lasod kain gam be'eshet ish. So Shlomo Zalman, exactly the same psak. He said it's always this psak was associated with Rav Moshe, but really exactly the same psak we find by Rav Shlomo Zalman, came out word for word. That if it's a goy, there's no isur. I don't think it's something we should promote. It's not something it's mutter. Something we should say only bekalei kol kutzim. Aval lechor, it's difficult to find what the isur is. There was a shaila. There's a big machlokes in this as to whether Moshe was choser. So the Mishnah Halachas Rav Menashe Klein, Menashe Katan, says, Gam ki be'emet kibalti michtav me'agon Rav Moshe Feinstein, וגם הוא חזר בו, ואסר לעשות כן משום לשום אישה בעולם, חס וחלילה. So the Menashe Klein says, you're right, Rav Moshe wrote it, but I have a letter from Moshe, Rav Moshe said, told me, חזר בו, that he thought it wasn't us. So Rav Tendler said, לא באמת חזר בו, ורק מלחץ פסול, כתב כך. The Rav Tender said that Rav Moshe never was chazer bo in anything. Rav Moshe would, before he wrote a tshuva, especially tshuva of this caliber, of this ramifications, Rav Moshe was yoshev shiva nikim, od shiva nikim, and he would come with a tshuva. So Rav Moshe, once he wrote a psak, wouldn't be chazer bo. If we said lo chazer bo, shum davar. In fact, if you really want to see the Rav Moshe lo chazer bo, there's actually the real strong words that Rav Moshe used are not English Moshe. In Chelkas Yaakov, the Rav Yaakov Breish is cholek Rav Moshe. We just saw before, it's one of the Oisrim, and he writes to Rav Moshe, and he prints Rav Moshe's answer to him. So Rav Moshe clearly doesn't chozer. If you want to see even more than that, Dibros Moshe Masechet Tubas at the end, Rav Moshe there has mamash tshuvot that he wrote about Zera Torah, that he clearly after Igros Moshe, after this whole thing that he was chozer, so clearly Zelo Yamatzav. The Rav Moshe say we should do it every day, but if we took it on a purely halachic level, Rav Moshe lo chazar bo is lo nachon. Ken, let's see what the say here. in a recent issue of Ami magazine, which obviously is 100% accurate, the interview of Reuven Fashon and Rav Reuven noted that the retraction was only written for the sake of peace because the controversy over artificial insemination at that time. He didn't really retract few with this, but Pashut. He hid it in Dibros Moshe. Of course, that's Rav Moshe. Rav Moshe was very smart. In Dibros Moshe, it's actually very interesting. Again, we're getting to history of Rav Moshe. Rav Moshe said, what was his greatest contribution to Am Yisrael? So every single Balabosa, what's Rav Moshe's contribution? Igros Moshe. That was Rav Moshe, was Igros Moshe. Everybody has to know. I remember when I got Igros Moshe, I was a bach in yeshiva, and my Zayda bought for me. He couldn't get in Israel. He bought for me in England a set of Igros Moshe. Sent it to me. It was mamash. It was a Shabbos. I wore a white shirt and made kiddush when I got it. It was a big deal. But Moshe said that wasn't a contribution. His contribution was Dibros Moshe. Well, how come we don't have Dibros Moshe? Dibros Moshe was for the Gaonim and the Torah scholars. That's where he wrote it. He wanted to say the real halacha. He wrote it in there. Igros Moshe was for the Amcha. So for me, I got excited at Igros Moshe. I was having Igros Moshe, but I got really excited from Igros Moshe. So that's why I wrote it. That's Pashut. Tov. So let's sing halacha l'maisa. Halacha l'maisa. What do we do about sperm donor? Would be surprised if there is a rav of a community who was not at some point in his rabbanos had a question about sperm donor, because it's such a common thing. It's such a something people ask, and if you haven't had a question l'maisa, you definitely had a shaila about it. So what do we do halacha l'maisa? It's very important, this question. Not only to think about milamala, what do we do l'maisa? First of all, l'kuli alma ein zelachatchila. We can never say that there's no problem of having a sperm donor. A couple will say, a person will come, they'll say. So we know Rav Moshe said, therefore it's mutter. It's not mutter. It's bekalu kol kitzin. We have no other possibility. Then we can talk about using a sperm donor. But nobody thought it was lachatchila. It's very, very important distinction. It was only mamash and a b'di'evid, mamash b'di'evid case. I can tell you that if we sat in Machon Pua in the 30 more years that we've been in existence, they're bodedim. I don't think it's even in the tens of people that got a heter to do sperm donor. It was mamash bodedim. Why? Because today with testicular exploration and with our possibility to find zera, even not in the ejaculate, where the people that need to have sperm donor is very, very small. We just said that the sperm banks are basically used for single women, for lesbians. They're not really used for couples anymore. The other thing is that many couples, when they hear a sperm donor, they want to do sperm donor. That's not adkan. They don't want to do that. It's perfectly legitimate. So it's not a chafila. There's clearly no chiyuv, approval. We can't say you're mechuyev to do it. There's a chiyuv to do, because you have to call the mitzvah approval. Let's imagine what do we write there? Because the person will come and say, I don't want to really do sperm donor, but I have a chiyuv approval, and therefore I have to have sperm donor. So clearly, a woman's not mechuyev approval, and you don't become the mitzvah by buying zera from someone else and bring it in. You may be kazem or oisik, where you were the oisik would approve you, but you don't become the mitzvah approve you. If you're not makan, there's no chiyuv, and you're not makan the mitzvah approve you. It should be clear that if we do it, it's not you're getting a child that you're makan the mitzvah approval. There's no nachon. Anus al pir debor. Sedegamor. Anarachmanis patre. It's sedegamor. Person can say you didn't have the was not able to fill the mitzvah, but he can't say I'm going to fill the mitzvah of having children by having sperm donor. The pashut shelo. Pashut shelo. We're talking about a very big shad dechak. Then ein le'esor bezeragui. What do you mean a shad dechak? Shad dechak would be that the couple come and say, we have no chayenu en chayim, we're going to get divorced. There's no possible way that we could live without having children. And there was cases in which bemed, the person says, this is bedami, and my family line will be erased, etc., etc. Okay, so shalas latir bezeragui, which is, and we said chashash gerushin. It's also called a shad dechak. The woman comes and says, I just have to have children in order to have something. There's no. Okay.
Rabbi, would you say that even before trying to adopt, or would you counsel?
I think we speak about adoption in a moment. Yes or no? I think we have a slide on it. So shad tova. There's no quite other way. So the thing is, person say, I want to do sperm donors. You say we have testicular biopsy. No, I don't do a testicular biopsy. So inka zeheter. You can't say that I can do sperm donor if I didn't do testicular biopsy. There's a shaila we have to do twice textual biopsy because maybe it wasn't successful the first time, it's successful the second time. So that's also a shaila. We have to say that bemet ain bemet derech acheret. If there's any possible way that we could have without it, then we have it. So we talked about before, one of the cases we said is the problematic husband, what we call as a spermi b'sechel. So we could say that as a spermi b'sechel, that's no heter. Just because you don't have a sperm, you don't use your own sperm, as it. There's no heter to have a sperm. The question then becomes, can we be mati? If we're mati for the first child, can we mati for the second child? Can we mati for the third child? So that's a big machlokus among the poskim. As the way that we can say, when we're getting into very problematic areas. So right now, the Rabbi Sigmund already spoke to you about egg donation, and he'll speak to you about surrogacy, about gestational carrier, and we're talking about sperm donor, which are big shailot, ilchatiot, and practical. So the question is, can we mati for one child? We didn't. Havli banim v'nayne tanochi. Or can we say once it's a heter? It's a big machlokas. I don't think we have to give a psak. But it's a sheila gedola. A couple shouldn't think, and we have this the whole time in the machon. The couple got a heter 10 years ago to a sperm donor, and they call up now and they have 4 children. How do they have 4 children? They have the sperm donor. Yeah, they're all from the sperm donor. So their local couple the couple should know that when they get a psak, the psak was for this child. After this child, the bershuv. But not, you got a heter, and this is it. Your whole life now you can do sperm donor. So no, so mamash heter for one child. Ken, the helper looks like he wants to say something. You want to agree or disagree? Ken, b'chavod.
Yeah. So I have didn't come to me as a shaila. I had a non-from lady who I'm a mole, so I did a bris. There was a spooner. Would whoever give a heter? She was a single lady. I think she just
I've got another 25 minutes. I need to sit down. I'm going to get there. I'm getting them. So then the question is it better to have exactly what Rav Hochman said before? Better to adopt a goy and do gior, or to have zeratorem. So to adopt a yid is vaday ben. There's not so many children up for adoption. Many years ago there were many children up for adoption. Today there's not, because there's not so many yidden having children like that in that way, because people maybe more careful, and the child suddenly have the children are very sick. But and so there's not so many. So is that better or not? So that's a lechora, a shailan among the poskim. According to most of the poskim, adoption is better. Rav Nevensal said that since it's trumat zera, so man, it becomes a yid. So then maybe because he says that the mother is the Jewish egg, as if the child is a yid. So therefore, lechora, it's better to do sperm donor. But most of the poskim don't say that. So therefore, the chora, if someone come to you, they want to do sperm donor, better to adopt. Better to adopt is better. Why do people not want to adopt? Because the woman says, I want to have my genes. Why should I miss out on having 0 genes because of him? And therefore, if there is a child that needs to be adopted, a yid is vadai, not a question. Like, I don't think there's such a mitzvah to adopt a goy, make him a yid. Zakin ladam. It's not really a zechut. It's a chavin for that child. The child doesn't want to be. The child doesn't come from somewhere and become a yid. So that's not so pashut. But Rav Poskim said it's better. The question that we also have is, what about trumat ubar? What about not giving an egg, not giving a sperm, but giving a whole embryo? A couple have an embryo; they have them left over. You have a couple that needs to have a sperm donor. Could they adopt a fertilized egg? So there's a deal among the poskim whether it's true or not, whether it's better or not. Again, lemaisa, it's not such a big nafkamina because most of the people don't want to have both an egg and a sperm. They have she has eggs and he doesn't have sperm. In the cases in which he doesn't have an egg and she doesn't have sperm, the lechor would be mutter, especially if we're talking about, let's say, a couple that are not going to use them and we know who they are, or people have died. People have a couple died and they have left frozen fertilized eggs. Maybe that's a solution. We know there's not going to be a question of shemisat achato. So that's a question that we will leave. So the garrison, the Rav Zalman Nechemi Goldberg and Rav Rosenthal, they thought it was better than trumat zera because that's already existing. That's already less of a question of mechur. They thought it was better, but not everybody thought it was the same. So those are the halacha l'maisa. Question we had a very interesting case recently of the problem. I have a couple, very Hasidic couple, and they got a heter 18 years ago to do sperm donor. In fact, and we mentioned them a little bit last week, that was Mr. and Mrs. Cohen, that you remember that they pulled the shelf and who were the Mr. and Mrs. Cohen from Jerusalem.
And they did sperm cell, they did gender selection. So they have a girl because they didn't want everybody to know that it's a sperm donor. They came to get a brocha from the Rebbe recently, and the Rebbe said, you know, when you go to do shidduchim, you have to tell. You have to say it's a sperm donor. Why? Because people don't want that. People, Kimberly, they say, I don't want to. I don't hold like Reb Moshe. I hold like the Sabarov. We're Hasidic Rebbe. We're Hasidic mention. We're going to hold like Hasidic poskim. And the Hasidic poskim came out against it. So he said, you have to tell them. The couple came back to me, of course, that then the whole thing doesn't make any sense. They did a whole procedure 18, 19 years ago in order to have a girl that nobody should know about it. What do we do? So I went to the Rebbe and I said, what do we do? So I said, what if I would find a Hasidic posik that would say they don't have to sell in shidduchim? So I said, Rav Osher Weiss, he's a Hasidic posek, and he'll tell them. So Rav Osher gave a psak. I called him up, and we discussed it for a few minutes. And he thought that it was the whole point was that it shouldn't be come out. They don't have to say. They don't have to say. So I went back to the Rebbe and said, that's it. Rav Osher said you don't have to say. So that's it. That's psak. He said that's very nice for you. I don't hold by your psak. So I said at least the Rebbe shouldn't tell anybody. The Rebbe should say shouldn't tell anybody. So that we agreed on. So the couple we were still waiting to have the shidduch. I'll tell you when the shidduch happens, Bezrat Hashem. And that was the psak. But it's interesting psak because he says that I said to the Rebbe, why do you if you get a heter? He said the heter was a heter that they should have children, but it's still the people still want to have it. That's but it doesn't make any difference anymore. The child is here. So no, since the idea is that the child still has a pagam, it's a possible pagam that people won't accept it. It's a problem. There's a chasam sofer like that in Even Ezer, Siman Daled. The Pirchei brings a chasam sofer that says if a person has one testicle and the chor is mutal avo b'kahal, but there are people that will hold that he's asur avo b'kahal, then he says you have to say in shidduchim. The chor is the same principle. So what do we put an emphasis on? We have someone comes to you and we give a heter. What are the emphasis? Emphasis, first of all, we have to recognize that it's very difficult for the husband to accept the situation. I once had a case of a couple came to me. She was religious. He was not. He wasn't religious. And I said they would needed to have sperm donor. I said to him, "What do you think?" He said, "I don't care, whatever she wants." So I asked her to leave the room, and I shouted at him. I said, "What do you mean you don't care? Of course you should care. We both understand that you care, but it's your defense mechanism is that you say don't care. Of course your wife shouldn't. You don't go. Of course you care. You should care. It should be. But we know that. So you have to give a lot of place for the difficulty of the husband. There are questions of whether we should mix the zera of the donor together with the zera of the husband, because maybe on the suffix that maybe he should have his own sperm think and maybe it's his own child, but we think that maybe that's it, that's onat dvarim, it's onat that he should think that really it's his. That's lahor no, but we just spoke about in the past. There's no reason to have hafchana because we know that he's not fertile. We don't have a din of movert haviro because only when we have regular chazal lokas rules. We only had a question when it was the regular way of getting pregnant. If she went and did it without the husband knowing, then she loses the kluba. Then he can say I divorce her, because then she has to have the permission from her husband. Or Moshe said it again many places that she has to have permission from her husband to clear herself. So those are the things that we need to put an emphasis on when we speak of that. The big question, and I'm sure that every Rav in America at least will have this question, and we in Pura started getting this question maybe 10 times a day. Ravaka, we have a single woman, exactly as Rav Halpin said before. Single woman, and she comes and says, "Can I do a sperm donor?" Or we have a child who's born from a woman who comes to do a sperm donor. There was my friend David Pelkowitz, Professor Pelkowitz, said that his daughter is a ganenit in some gun in the Upper West Side, and he said of the 30 children in the class, 10 of them are born of some complex, no father, no mother, single women, lesbian women, whatever. So that's a third of the children in this gun, and that's going to affect more and more of our Jewish community. That we're going to have more and more people that this is the situation, that we have children that are born like that. So what do we do? So the Maisa is we in Pua hold clearly that it's awesome. Clearly it's awesome, and almost Kuli Alma say in it's problematic. There are more and more dayot that are giving a heter. The heterim were spoken in Lumud by Rav Shlomo Fisher. Even you have poskim like Rav Davud Abu Chatzera from Nahariya, who's more of a Sephardic Makubal, he gives a heter. Rav Rosenthal gave heterim. There were Rav Mashash. There were poskim that gave heterim. But b'chol it's hard to. It's still a problem. It's still a sore because the only reason that we said that we give a sperm donor was in case in which it was almost Girushin. It's not Girushin. I understand that it's very difficult for her, but it ain't Girushin. I'm sure everybody here has an older aunt who never got married and never had children. I had aunts and cousins. My mother had cousins like that. Never got married, never had children. So it's very sad. But the problem is the question of pritzus is that we should say, Ken, she's a Zane, and she's going to say, no, I took a Zera Torem, and it creates a situation in which we're problematic. We don't think that birth is in order to give my own personal satisfaction, but we have children because it's a kiyum of what a Kodesh Baruch Hu wants us to do. The Kodesh Baruch Hu wanted to have a davak bishto. We had a chovah to get married. And the Kodesh Baruch Hu wants to have children just because we want to have them. The same for a single guy. That's exactly the same. I have single guys who'll take I'll take a surrogate and have a child. It's also for the exactly the same. It's not only women can have. Men also. The idea was to have husband and wife. It was a big question of whether it's pogea on the sanctity of the marriage, that we think that if the whole impetus to get married is because we want to have children. So we can say that a single woman could have children without getting married. So then there will be women, maybe a very small number, but there will be women who will prefer not to get married because they had previous very, very difficult circumstances with men, women who were sexually abused in the past, and women who had very difficult relationships with men. I prefer to have a child without having a husband, which I can understand them, but again, it's still halachically problematic. A woman called me today. She said she has 7 children, and she is a woman, a married woman, and she is very, very difficult to have children. And she says, I'm crazy. I keep wanting to have more children. So I said, you're not crazy. You're 100% normal. The doctor says that you should have more children. He's crazy. Why? I said it's because Meshach Hochman. The Meshach Hochman says why? Why is it tzivui to have children only for men, not for women? The answer is very simple, because women have that existential need to have children without having tzivui. Men need to have the tzivui. Therefore, they otherwise they would stay at home. They would be in the base midrash, never get out and have children. So the Rav Soloveitchik says in the Ish Visha, he says that if because men and women are so different, if there was no mitzvah to have children, then and there was no Kodesh Baruch Hu was the Yetzer Hara, then men would never ever marry women. It would be too difficult to have a relationship together. So I understand that the women say men are so difficult. And for men, it's not so easy to have a surrogate. For women, it's easy. They'll take a zera. It's not only the kedushat the mishpacha, but also the whole concept of mishpacha, the whole institution of mishpacha. The other question: we're creating a child who will be, at least in many communities, a yatom, and he'll be umlan. He'll be a misken. He'll be disadvantaged. We have in the Machon one of the rabbonim. His father died when he was very, very young. Not much. He never ever knew his father. And he says growing up without a father was very, very difficult for me, even though his mother later remarried, and he has a relationship with his stepfather, not a very good one, but he has a relationship with him. But it's very, very difficult for him. So he says that the idea of not to have a father figure, it's not so pashut. The other possibility we have for single women, of course, is to freeze their eggs. We're going to speak about freezing eggs in a future shiur. We'll speak about the possibilities of freezing eggs. So that's what we offer them. So a single woman calls up, we'll give the whole spiel of why it's usher, and we'll tell, but we're very happy to help you, and we're happy to tell you that the answer would be that you can freeze your eggs. That's not always an option, but for many women that would be an answer. What happens if she has a child? She has a child. Now, what's the yichus of the child? So if the child was born from Zeragui, then the child's mutal avo b'kahal, and the woman can marry a kohen. She's not if it was a daughter, sorry. She'd be able to marry a kohen. That's what Rav Shlomo Zalman says, or Moshe says. The Bar Chevron, the Rav Dov Lior, is cholek. He thought it was usher to marry a kohen, but lechora the poskim says mutar. If it was also a egg donation, so they had an egg donation and a sperm, and both the egg and the sperm are not Jewish, then the child would need to have gior, because we just spoke. You already had the shiur about egg donation. We know that it's a pasuk, so it was a suffix.
The child also would need to have a pidyon, right? If the child was born, need to have a pidyon of ben. Ken,
Could the single woman who has a sperm donation as a way of having a child, could she then marry a Kohen? She's still a betula, essentially.
According to what we just said, there's the psul. She's not a zona. The psul of zunut is only when it's only beer.
Right.
Therefore, Chora would say would be mutter.
We wouldn't even because she didn't actually have biat znut.
Yeah, there's no beer. There's no beer. She wouldn't be a zona. A woman's in Tababa and Bati. So would she be able to get married to Kohen? I think that's exactly the Gemara. That's exactly the Gemara. Masach Chagiga says Lechor she's mutter. So that's if it's a goy. This is a safek goy. I don't know. I didn't check out. If she knows it's a goy, she went and she checked it out. And Charles Kasher. She says safek. She got to America. I assume it's a goy. I know that. And if I'm not badakti, they told me it was a rov or I think. So in such a case, if it's a safek goy, then we'd say someone said now it's a shtuki because now possibly it is from a yid and maybe there is. And lemaisa though, rova poskim, if the bank doesn't say that it's Jewish, then we can assume that the child is not Jewish, then it's not a shtuki. Why is that? Because Zera Yudi in the world is more expensive than Zera Goy. Why? Because Jews are desired people. And therefore, many people say, I'm a Yid, even not exactly a Yid. I mean, they have a Jewish grandfather, though, the right that they're Jewish, they're partly Jewish. So if he didn't say Jewish, then we can say the rov that it's a Goy. If it was from a Yudi, and we don't know who it is, then it's shtuki. Why b'cholav goy matir? The child comes. A woman comes to you. That says the Reb Halpin says I have a woman in my community. The child comes. It comes to be bar mitzvah. Who is it from? It's from a yid. Who? I don't know. I got it from a. I was makpid to get it from a Jewish bank. And what do we do now? So how can we be matir? Because maybe it's trey rube. What's a trey rube? On the one hand, Rova rube maksherin. The Rova olam kasher, and the Rova olam is mamzer. Rova people that give the zera and the chora are ksherim. And it's not biznut, it wasn't done biznut, and therefore the chora, the maaseh, we can say that it's mutter. If it came from a Jew, yadua, then we say whoever the father was. Father was a Kohen, the child will be a Kohen. Le maaseh, if the woman comes and says, and this is a question I have every day, I had a case like this today. My friend is going to do this situation. What should I tell her? Tell her, don't do it. It's a problem. But if she's going to do it anyway, better she should have it with a goy than having with a Jew. Unless another possibility we spoke about this with Nevin said on Sunday was that she can have a marriage or some sort of relationship with a man who she knows, and they'll have a baby together. And there'll be some sort of what we call in Hebrew hurut shutafut. They'll have some sort of partnership in the child. That's also a possibility. It's mechuar, it's magil. However, that's better than having a yid who we don't know and we have a suffering. So the best thing to do if we have a ravaka, the best thing is not to do it. If she does it, the best thing is to have a goy. After that, the next best thing after the goy is to have Jew who we know, she'll know who it is. And the least good is to have a Jew who we don't know who it is. That's the chora, the ravaka. What is the yichus of the child? The child is born, wants to get, and the woman is married. So if it's from a zera goy, then the child is mutalav b'gehal. If it's from a Jew that we don't know who it is, a married woman, good, then we don't know why it's not a mamzer. Why? Because you said it wasn't through bia, but yet some say it's a mamzer, and some say it's a safek mamzer. Right? We just said before. And some say it's not ra'ul avobikahal, but Rova poskim say that we make it that he can come in because the chashash of semi sachoto is lo makeh b'diavad, and it's also a davar rachok to really think that he's actually going to marry his sister. But if it was someone yadua, again, and even if he's a Kohen, the child will be considered a Kohen. Of course, the opposite would also be the case. If it's Mr. and Mrs. Cohen and the Zera is not a Kohen, the child won't be a Kohen. It's clearly pashut. All right. The din, a woman had a sperm donor, she has a child, and what's the din? And the couple get divorced. So after the couple get divorced, we clearly say that the father has a chovah to support the child. He can't say I don't recognize him. It's like we have a child who's adopted. At the end of the day, you raise a child. It's like you're a child, and lechora you accept it on yourself that you're going to take responsibility for her children, and lechora therefore you have to pay. It's lechora the idea. If the child is a kohen, and the child born, if the father is a kohen and the child is not a kohen, then what do we do with the child? So some say the child can get an aliyah as the first aliyah, and some say he can go up as to duchen, and he should mafliya the bracha. He should oversay Shem Hashem. Getting a first aliyah is not a problem because we give it to Talmid Chacham as well. It's called in the Gemara, in the Mishonim, to go up and to do duchening. So that's also, we know that's also a diyun in the poskim where the person can go up to do duchening who's not a kohen, who can come and just stand with the other kohanim, who can just be there. So you just be there. You tell him just be there. That's it. If the husband is a Kohen or Levi, we already spoke about it last week. That was one of the reasons that we said that it would maybe possibly do PGD in order to have a daughter. And the came maybe is even if it's in a Levi, because even a Levi would be a question of getting an aliyah as a Levi and also eating maaser, as we will later on, but we'll get there. The question that we have, a big question, is should we tell the child? The knee-jerk reaction of everybody is, of course we should tell the child. And one said to Rav Shechter, should we tell the child that he's born from egg donation? So Rav Shechter said, Avadai, of course. He says the child's right to know. So I said, but then there'll be schools that won't accept the child because they'll say he's from egg, he's egg donation, it's not exactly kosher. He said, that's a problem with the school. So I said, the problem is that the Rav is such a tzaddik, he thinks everybody's a tzaddik like him. He thinks everybody works just like the automatic on halacha. It's mutar asur. People are not like that. People have emotions. People are very tied up in their hang-ups. It's not a shoot. So should we tell the child or not? So the knee jerk is to say yes. The reality is that many people do not tell their children that they were born from donors, and there was actually been studies that have shown that the child are not disadvantaged not to know that they're from a donor. They've followed children who were from donors who have not been told, and they maybe were told later. They're not necessarily disadvantaged to tell them. If the father's a Kohen, then we have to tell the child. The son, they have to say, because you're not a Kohen. Even if he goes up to the duchening, yes, he can't say Shem Hashem. So we have to tell him if that's the case. So that's the maaseh, the questions that we have. So I want to just go back quickly over the ikarei devarim that we said. The egg donation, sperm donation is a very big halachic question. It is only mamash used by the evet. And I would say that, as we said before, that the number of married men who need to use a sperm donor today is very, very small. And since we have, as we said before, the technology to make in almost all cases to be able to find sperm. In very rare cases, we will not find sperm. There's really very few cases that we'd need to use it. That's in sperm donor. When we do give a heter, we have to recognize what it means to the psychological makeup of the couple, what that does for them. Because at the end of the day, and that's the same with egg donation, and it's the same with surrogacy, the same with any third party. That third party is supplying me something that my spouse cannot give me. And therefore, we have to be very careful about the recognition of the place of the disadvantaged party in that couple. And if it's the husband who can't give sperm, it's even more, because generally what makes us men is that we are virile and we're fertile, and which is why many men don't want to do a semen analysis, because I don't want to put my virility on the line. I don't want to bet my masculinity is going to be checked out. We have to recognize that. We have to be very sensitive for that and to understand what that means, and to sometimes say, look, your wife's going to divorce you, Magila, that she should have this situation. Nobody asked for it, but that's in maternity. I've had the opposite though. I've had men who were willing to do sperm donor, and then women said, and their wives said, "B'shum pani b'ofen, no way. I prefer to have no children. I married him. I love him. That's what I want. I don't want to have. I want to have his DNA. Someone who doesn't DNA, Lord, I prefer not to have any children. So we have to recognize that. We have to be very sensitive of that, and to be very easy that. And the opposite is what we said. Not to say that the husband says, I don't care, whatever she wants. No, she's not. She's having the child with the doctor. She's having a child with the donor. She's you together having a child through this donor, which is why it's very important to have anonymous donors and not to have a relationship between the couple and the donor, because that is just too complex, that the donor should be part of the woman's life, that again, he's able to supply something that her husband is not able to do. And it's very important that we understand the psychology and the makeup of what it means, the impact that has.
Can you elaborate on that? I would think sometimes maybe that they would prefer to have like the egg donor be the mother's sibling, the mother's sister, to adopt.
They would prefer it, and I don't know whether Rabbi Sigmund told me he spoke a little bit about egg donation, and but I think that we have to recognize what that does to the family makeup. So if I have, for example, you said the case of the egg donor, that is someone who we know, we come to a simcha, and the egg donor and the mother are there. And the mother says something to the child, and the egg donor says, what are you telling? How can you speak to my baby like that? And it's a very complex situation. So there are families in which that works well, and most families that works terribly. And therefore, I think, generally promote to have anonymous donors is better, including with sperm donors.
Okay,
in fact, Rav Amar, when you'll speak about surrogacy, I think it's next week, Rabbi Sigmund will speak about it. So Rav Amar has said that there should be zero relationship between the surrogate and the husband. Because then we have to know who she is. She can't be anonymous, because we're just going to give birth to the baby. But we have to realize that that's a very complex relationship.
Well, it's very complex, but it's also very personal, and sometimes I think, with all due respect, I think the Rav is looking at this from a mathematical, like a science, when it's really much more than that. This is really much more about the emotion of what happens to raising children, and therefore sometimes I think a lot of families would prefer that if the egg donor has to happen that way, that it happened bedavka from the mother's sister or something like that to donate.
Which is why it's important, because as you said, that's the general natural reaction. Why it's important to present that raises other problems. That's not so pashut that clearly this is upset. I don't think I'm being mathematical. I think I'm being very emotional. I think I understand the emotions of that people can be more complex than I think about.
Maskim. I asked for Mechila. I'm sorry. Thank you.
No, Mechila. Kol beseder gamor. Don't say Mechila. I just think we have to. People come and think it's better to have. I give example. It's better to have a Jewish sperm donor than non-Jewish sperm. Everybody would think that. I went out. I got a year, especially. The Maisa is halachically zalonachon, and we have to explain why that's the case. We spoke at the end about Ravakot, and I think that it's a big minefield. And we have to realize again, like we said before, the reality of the complexity of what that means for the mother and for the child. And the question is, do we penalize a child that we have? So we said the mother don't do it. Now the child's here. Can we give him a bar mitzvah, not give him a bar mitzvah? So Rav Aaron Lichtenstein said you can't penalize. We can't get gezeras that the Chazal didn't make. We can't come and say that we're going to posel a child who was born because his mother didn't isser. Mother lot of. And he thought it was terrible that women should do that. He never thought it was mutter. However, I can't penalize the child for what the mother did. And therefore, if we have a child, we have to, especially the child's mutar lavobigal, then we have to allow him to lavobigal, bekola muvan. That was what we said. And the ramification that we stood, and of course, I will send you the slides. And Zell. Yes, Sheilot, Bayot, I very much appreciate Blitzstein's a very important comment. And the Bichlal, I think it's a chashuv mod to understand the complexities from both sides. And I must give him mechus. Ken, vakasha. Ken.
Yeah, I apologize if this was addressed previously. You mentioned earlier, at the beginning of the presentation, not a halachic point, but that psychological reasons might be a reason to go with the sperm donation. Is that true? I think you mentioned like Down syndrome. Let's say something like ADHD. Is that something that gets passed down, or is that a reason to go into sperm donation?
We spoke last week about the complexity of genetics, right? So we understand that something like ADHD is multifactorial. It's very hard to come and say that it's clearly there's a marker that we know. There's a cluster of genes that are related to learning disabilities. But remember, learning disabilities is related to many things. Also, having learning disabilities doesn't mean you're disadvantaged necessarily as a human being. There are many great people, men and women, who have ADHD and did amazing things because of ADHD. So we have to think about, we want to think about what traits are we trying to wean out and why, and are we able to do that? But I think I would be very careful. A couple of things said, in our family we have ADHD. We have, even goes something worse, we have bipolar in my family, and therefore I don't want to use my sperm. And I've had this conversation before. I don't use my sperm because we have bipolar. I would be very careful. I would be very wary giving heter for that situation. I think it's Tov, okay, shalom, sarot tovot, kol tov, shalom.